All right, guys, for this week's Exercise Science Lab, the exercise library part, we talked about the kneeling, curl, and press and the push-ups. Let's go through the kneeling, curl, and press as a review. All right. So why do we do this? A lot of times we're breaking down some sort of clean and press, some sort of squat and then press, right? We're just talking about total body compound movements, total body functional movements, right? We're always extending, that triple extension we get through our ankles, our knees, and our hips. And then we're usually driving up. So whether I'm jumping, whether I'm producing force one way or the other with my entire body, my lower body, my upper body, etc., right? So we go down to a high kneeling position. Remember, this is high kneeling, this is half kneeling, okay? We get into a high kneeling position because it takes our legs kind of out of the equation to some extent. I don't get the triple extension from my legs, so I got to generate a little more power through my upper body for this clean and press movement. We call it curl and press because we're going to curl the weight and then press it up, okay? So why do we do this exercise? So first question about this was general purpose. I just like the idea of swinging here. I like to watch my clients and athletes see how well can they stabilize their torso, how well can they stabilize their hips, isometrically, and my abs. So I'm isometrically contracting my glutes, my hip flexors, my quads, my hamstrings, along with my abs, my obliques, my back muscles, etc., right? So that alone, I'm just gonna assess 10 or 12 swings, and then I'm gonna drive up there and get a curl. Now it's a curl, that's kind of a curl. I don't mind if it looks a little bit more like a clean, right? Like I'm gonna clean it up and catch, clean it up and catch, okay? And then clean and then press, all right? So that's the curl and press or clean and press movement in a high kneeling position, all right? The purpose then is to not only work on core stability and torso spinal stability as I'm doing this swing and curl and press, but I'm also working on core timing. It's the sequence of muscles contracting. It's your neuromuscular component coming to play, right? That it's not only doing a plank as we talked about in lab, where you can do a plank all day long, that's great, you have good planking core strength, but your core needs to turn on right at the right time. So if I get used to this swing, it's got to turn on. It's got to lock in place right there and then get ready to perform something athletically. All right? There's your purpose. Let's get into some muscles. We did a basic jam analysis. So we talked about the shoulder joint. So the shoulder joint and elbow joint. So let's primarily talk about the shoulder joint. That's our primary engine, upper body, and pressing in this motion here, right? So my glenohumeral joint, my shoulder joint, is going to press vertically, right? Which means my glenohumeral joint is flexing as my elbow joint extends. All right, there are my joint actions. All right, I'm moving in the sagittal plane. All right, sometimes people go here and then they press there. I might be more in the frontal plane, do more abduction, but for the most part, we like to remain in the sagittal plane as we do shoulder joint flexion, elbow extension. Therefore, while we're doing shoulder joint flexion, what am I using? My front deltoids is a primary mover. My upper pecs, my clavicular pectoral major, is going to be a primary mover, okay? As I press up. My synergist might be one of those other muscles, so if my anterior delts are doing a lot of the work, maybe my clavicular pec is a synergist, maybe my lateral deltoid is a synergist. If I go one joint away to my elbow, my tricep can be considered a synergist to the overall compound move, okay? If we just talk about the elbow joint, then the tricep becomes the primary mover, the agonist of the elbow joint, right? But as we talk about the movement, the primary movers are upper pec, clavicular pectoral major, and deltoid, right? Lateral delt and front delt, anterior deltoid, all right? And then what else did we say? Oh, the stabilizer. Stabilizer of the joint. Whenever we're talking about the glenohumeral joint, the stabilizers are the rotator cuff, all right? That's stabilizing my joint. That's keeping my humerus in a pretty good, ideally centrated position within my glenoid fossa, within the scapula, as it swings up, all right? If that rotator cuff isn't doing its job, then my humeral head gets to be a little too loosey-goosey, and then I don't get optimal force production in the desired direction, right? So right now we're working on that vertical vector, if you will, all right? Using all of our kinesiology terms. The last thing is fixators. Two ways we describe fixator. We can either go one joint proximal, meaning if we're primarily talking about your shoulder joint, one joint proximal is your shoulder girdle. your scapulothoracic joint. So you can talk about fixating the scapulothoracic joint. Remember, just because it's a more stable area does not mean that it's stiff or static. There has to be a rhythm between my glenohumeral joint, my shoulder joint, and my scapulothoracic joint, right? As my humerus flexes and I go into full flexion here, my scapula has to move with that, okay? But the primary fixator we're talking about is not only is the shoulder blade fixated on the rib cage as it upward rotates and elevates to accommodate for my moving humerus, I need to fixate my spine as well, which is the point of a lot of this exercise. All right? There's your gem analysis. So the core muscles, right? The rectus spinae, multifidi, rectus abdominis, transverse abdominis, those are your fixators of the spine. My phone's bleeping a little bit. I hope it's all getting on what's clicking. I think people are texting me. They're texting me. All right, question number 9. What common movement faults are you observing for? For the most part, you're looking for the toes to hop up, right? Like when we're swinging here, sometimes you just see the toes, which means they're just not stabilizing well in the sagittal plane, right? So if we stay tall, slightly tuck your tail, another movement fault might be that I'm dumping into my anterior tilt, right there, which means I don't have my abs engaged, right? So I'm gonna get as tall as I can through my tailbone, through the back of my skull, right? So not posterior tilting, tucking my tail a little bit if it means a better kind of neutral tall spine. So I'm looking for a lordotic curve. I'm looking for maybe toes to pop up. And then when I do this press, does someone excessively extend here or list forward with their hips? Remember, a list is like forward, backwards, side to side. Do a little dance. So if I list forward and then extend my thoracic spine, I'm pressing here. Now, if it's a ton of weight and I'm going purely for a weightlifting PR, maybe that's okay. Remember, good form, good technique, good form isn't just this universal principle about what form looks like. It's what's your goal, right? If you're moving a ton of weight, yeah, then maybe you'll get some leverage and go there. But ideally, for this particular exercise, we're stabilizing our spine, we're pressing up, we're staying tall and going there. So toes coming up, anterior tilting, too much lordotic spine, thoracic spine extension, leaning back. What I'm doing there is bringing more pec into it and getting some press there. And then anything that happens with the neck is another common fault. So it's one thing to press through all the way, and it may look like I'm throwing my chin forward, but I do not want to protract my chin forward. I don't want to flex my neck just to get pressed there. That's another compensation and movement fault we're looking at. All right? And then finally, what is the primary difference between performing this bilaterally versus unilaterally? All right, so if I go to a unilateral, meaning one leg forward, I'm in a half kneeling position. I usually like to do this one arm. Now, if I'm swinging the weights, I don't have as much sagittal need to stabilize in the sagittal plane. Let me word it like that, okay? Because that leg's taking care of that. But I do have a little bit of frontal plane stability challenge here, right? Especially if I'm gonna do a unilateral weight. So nothing is in this hand, I'm gonna press up here. So I might just stay here and press. So I'm working sort of in the frontal plane here. That's a big difference. So I don't have as much sagittal stability challenge, but I have more frontal stability challenge as I press up. All right, so there's your kneeling curl and press. Great exercise. Start light if you're gonna bring these into your training program. 3 sets at 8 to 12, which I know is pretty cliche or typical, but it's a good place to start. I like to do this maybe as a dynamic warm-up, so do it just to wake everything up. You get moving on some exercises, but you could also handle some weight. It's a nice accessory move, so for performing something like a clean, a hang clean, something like that, if you want to go lighter with dumbbells before you go to a full dumbbell clean and press or dumbbell snatch, dumbbell jump shrug, something like that. All right, there you go. And we'll see you in the next lab.